I picked up on the fifth ring. It was 5:23 inches the morning, and at 67 years old, I've learned that calls at this hour mean someone's dead, dying, or in jail. None of those options ever lead anywhere good. Hello? My voice came out rough, thick with sleep. Static crackled through the line, then a man's voice, measured but urgent. Is this Robert Mitchell speaking? Yes. Who's this? Mr. Mitchell, my name is Captain David Okonkwo. I'm calling from the Department of National Defense. I'm sorry to contact you at this hour, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. It's regarding your son. My hand went numb. The phone almost slipped from my grip. I haven't had a son in 18 years. Not since September 2007, when 2 officers showed up at my door in Edmonton to tell me that Corporal Thomas Mitchell had been killed in action outside Kandahar. Not since we buried an empty casket because there wasn't enough left to send home. Mr. Mitchell, the captain's voice pulled me back. I understand this is difficult, but we have a Canadian citizen in a medical facility in Islamabad who claims to be your son. He was recovered 3 weeks ago from a remote compound in the Hindu Kush Mountains. He has no identification, but he's provided details that we've been able to verify. Sir, we believe he's telling the truth. The room spun. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. My wife, Carol, stirred beside me, her eyes opening with that immediate alertness that comes from decades of being a military spouse. That's impossible, I said. The words felt hollow, mechanical. We were told he was killed in an IED explosion. We held a memorial service. His name is on the memorial wall in Ottawa. There was a pause, the kind that stretches out when someone's trying to figure out how to deliver information that will shatter your entire understanding of reality. Mr. Mitchell, I need to ask you something specific. Your son, did he have any identifying marks? Something that wouldn't be in his military records? My throat closed up. Yeah, he did. Can you describe it? I closed my eyes, seeing Tommy at age 8, showing me the scar on his right calf where he'd caught it on the boards during hockey practice. It was shaped like a hockey stick. We'd joked about it, called it his good luck charm. He'd never told the recruitment medical staff because he thought they might disqualify him for the infantry if they knew he'd had such a deep laceration. He has a scar on his right calf, I said, shaped like a hockey stick. Got it playing Bantam hockey when he was 8 years old. 12 stitches. We told people it was from falling off his bike because he didn't want to sound clumsy on the ice. The silence on the other end of the line lasted 5 full seconds. Mr. Mitchell, the man in Islamabad, has that exact scar. He also says you used to sing him a song. Something about a bear and a cabin in the woods. He says it wasn't a real song, that you made it up. Old Bear in the Timber. I hadn't thought about that song in decades. I'd made it up when Tommy was 3, terrified of the dark, convinced there were monsters in his closet. I'd sing about a friendly bear who lived in a cabin and protected all the forest animals. The melody was stolen from some folk tune I half remembered, but the words were all mine. I'd never written them down, never sang them for anyone but Tommy. Mr. Mitchell? Are you still there? I'm here, my voice cracked. Where exactly is he? Lady Reading Hospital in Islamabad. He's stable, but he's in rough shape physically and psychologically. Mr. Mitchell, I need to be clear about what you're walking into. This man has been held captive for 18 years. He has significant trauma, both physical and mental. He remembers fragments, not everything. Some days he's lucid, some days he's not. I looked at the clock. 5:27 a.m. Islamabad was 10 hours ahead. It would be mid-afternoon there. I'm coming. How fast can you get me there? We can have you on a military transport out of Edmonton by noon today. But Mr. Mitchell, before you agree to this, you need to understand that even if this is your son, he may not be the man you remember. 18 years of captivity changes a person in ways that can't be undone. I don't care. If there's even a chance, I'm taking it. I hung up before he could say anything else. Before 18 years of accepted grief could talk me out of it. Before I could think too hard about what it meant that Tommy might have been alive all this time while we mourned him. Carol was sitting up now, her face pale in the early morning light. Robert, Who was that? Someone says they found Tommy. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I know. I was already moving, pulling on yesterday's jeans, grabbing a shirt. I know how it sounds. But they knew about the scar, Carol. They knew about the song. Nobody knows about Old Bear and the timber except us. Carol's eyes filled with tears. We'd had calls before, twice in the first 5 years. People claiming to have information, mostly scammers looking to exploit grieving parents. We'd learned to be cautious, to protect ourselves from false hope. But this was different. This was the Department of National Defense calling at 5:23 inches the morning. I'm coming with you, she said, already reaching for her clothes. No. I said it gently but firmly. Not yet. Let me go first. See what this is. If it's real, if it's really him, I'll call you immediately. If it's not, I needed her to be here, solid and grounded. Something stable for me to come back to when this hope inevitably shattered. She understood. After 44 years of marriage, 38 of them as a military family, she always understood. The military transport left Edmonton at 1:15 p.m. I spent the 4-hour flight to Islamabad staring out the window at nothing, trying to prepare myself for whatever I was about to find. Captain Okonkwo had sent me a briefing package. Medical reports, preliminary interview notes, photographs that I couldn't bring myself to look at yet. Thomas Mitchell had enlisted at 19, right out of high school. He'd wanted to serve, wanted to make a difference. I'd been terrified, having served myself in the ADS, but proud too. He'd been deployed to Afghanistan in 2006 as part of Operation Athena. On September 4th, 2007, his convoy had been hit by an IED outside Kandahar. 2 soldiers killed instantly, 3 injured, 1 missing and presumed dead. That one had been Tommy. They'd searched for 3 weeks, found his rifle, his helmet, scraps of his uniform. DNA evidence had been inconclusive. The blast zone was massive. They'd told us that with the heat, the scavengers, the chaos of the explosion, sometimes there just wasn't enough left to identify. They'd declared him killed in action. We'd had a memorial service at the Garrison Church in Edmonton. His brothers had given the eulogy. I couldn't speak. Couldn't get the words past the grief lodged in my throat like concrete. For 5 years, I'd searched anyway, contacted every organization that dealt with POWs, missing soldiers, displaced persons, sent his photo to refugee camps, hospitals, prisons. Nothing. Eventually, even I had to accept that he was gone. We'd moved on, the way you move on after losing a child. You don't heal. You just learn to function around the wound. We landed in Islamabad at 4:30 a.m. local time. Captain Okonkwo met me at the military section of the airport, late 40s, with the bearing of someone who delivered too much bad news to too many families. Mr. Mitchell, he shook my hand. Thank you for making the journey. I want to prepare you before we go to the hospital. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The man we recovered calls himself Thomas, but sometimes he uses other names. Muhammad, Yusuf, a few others. We believe his captors moved him between locations, gave him different identities to prevent exactly this kind of situation. He speaks English, but with an accent now, mixed with Pashto and Dari. He has extensive scarring, evidence of torture and harsh living conditions. He weighs 145 pounds. According to your son's enlistment records, he was 187 when he deployed. I processed this. Tommy had been muscular, a hockey player with broad shoulders and strong legs. 145 pounds on his frame would make him skeletal. What does he remember? Fragments. He remembers being Canadian. He remembers Edmonton, though he can't always articulate why it matters. He has flashbacks that seem to be memories of his childhood, his family, his time in the military. But it's not coherent. 18 years of trauma has fractured his memory. The doctors say it may improve with therapy and time, or it may not. We drove through Islamabad as dawn broke over the mountains. Lady Reading Hospital was a sprawling complex on the edge of the city. Captain Okonkwo led me through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and suffering, past rooms filled with people whose stories I would never know. He's been here for 3 weeks, the captain continued. He was severely dehydrated, malnourished, suffering from multiple infections. We've stabilized him physically, but psychologically, he's fragile. Some days, he's present and lucid. Other days, he retreats into himself completely. Today is a good day. We stopped outside a room on the 3rd floor. Captain Okonkwo put his hand on the door. "Mr. Mitchell, I want you to know that regardless of what happens in there, your son, the Tommy you remember, he endured something unimaginable. If this is him, the fact that he survived at all is remarkable." I nodded. I couldn't speak. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might collapse right there in the hallway. He pushed the door open. The room was small. Standard hospital setup. A bed, a chair, a window with bars on it for security. A man sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the mountains. He was thin, painfully so, his hospital gown hanging off his frame. His hair was longer than military regulation, streaked with gray that shouldn't be there, on a 4-2-year-old man. His face was lined, weathered, aged beyond his years. But when he turned to look at me, I saw Tommy's eyes. The same dark brown, almost black, that he'd inherited from my mother. The same way of looking at you, direct and assessing, even through obvious pain. "Dad!" The word came out hoarse, uncertain. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 18 years of grief and rage and desperate hope crashed over me all at once. He stood up slowly, like his legs might not hold him. He was shorter than I remembered, like the years had compressed him. Or maybe I was just remembering him at 19, still growing. Now he was 42, and life had made him small. "I don't remember everything," he said. His voice had changed, deeper, rougher, with that accent Captain Okonkwo had mentioned. "But I remember you. I remember the song about the bear, old bear in the timber, who kept the monsters away. I remember you teaching me to skate on Haralack Park when I was 5. How you held my hands for 3 hours because I was too scared to let go. I remember the way you do play-by-play commentary during Oilers games, pretending to be Rod Phillips, even though you were terrible at it." My vision blurred with tears. The play-by-play thing, that had been our private ritual. During games, I'd narrate in a ridiculous announcer voice, making up absurd commentary that made him laugh. We'd never told anyone about it. It was just ours. Tommy. I crossed the room in 3 steps, pulled him into my arms. He was stiff at first, uncertain, like he'd forgotten how to be held. Then he collapsed against me, his whole body shaking with sobs that sounded like they'd been trapped for 18 years. He smelled wrong, not like my son, not like the kid who'd worn too much Axe body spray and ate peanut butter straight from the jar. He smelled like hospital antiseptic and old trauma and years of suffering I couldn't begin to imagine. But when I closed my eyes, I could feel the shape of him, the way his head fit against my shoulder, even though he was taller than me now, the way he'd always been. The way his breath hitched when he cried, the same pattern I remembered from when he was small. "You're alive," I whispered. "You're alive. That's all that matters." We stood there for a long time, 2 broken people trying to remember how to be father and son. Eventually, we sat, him in the chair, me on the edge of the hospital bed, and slowly, haltingly, he began to tell me what he remembered. The IED had gone off. He remembered that. The blast, the chaos, the pain. He'd been thrown clear of the vehicle, injured but alive. Before he could get his bearings, someone had grabbed him. Not insurgents looking for information, or at least not initially. Someone looking for leverage, for a bargaining chip. Everything after that was fragments. Years in different locations, sometimes underground, sometimes in remote compounds. Years of being moved at night, of different faces, different voices demanding different things. Years of being Mohammed when they needed him to blend in, of being Yusuf when they moved him to a new location, of slowly forgetting that he'd ever been Thomas Mitchell from Edmonton, Alberta. The memories had started coming back about 2 years ago, he said. Little things that didn't fit. Dreams about snow, about hockey rinks, about a father who sang songs about bears. But they were jumbled, confused, mixed in with years of survival and trauma that felt more real than those distant childhood memories. Then, 3 months ago, Someone new had arrived at the compound, a younger fighter who spoke English with a North American accent. They'd talked carefully at first, then more freely. The fighter had mentioned Canada, mentioned Edmonton, and something in Tommy's brain had cracked open. "I knew I was supposed to be someone else," he said. "I knew Thomas Mitchell was my name, but I couldn't remember how I knew it. Couldn't remember my family, my life before. Just knew that I'd been someone else once." The compound had been raided by Pakistani forces 4 weeks ago. They'd found him in a cell, emaciated, feverish, barely coherent. He'd told them he was Canadian military. They'd thought he was delusional until they'd checked his scar, run his fingerprints through international databases, contacted Canadian authorities. I listened. I didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just let him talk. Some of what he said made sense. Some of it was confused, fragmented the way trauma memories often are. But through it all, there were details. Small, specific things that no imposter could have known. The way I always burned the bannock when we went camping, trying to cook it over an open fire like my grandmother had shown me. The inside joke about our neighbor's dog, Mr. Whiskers, who was actually a girl dog, but the neighbor refused to admit his mistake. The stupid argument we'd had the night before he deployed, about whether he should have gone to university first, how he'd said he'd go after his tour, and I'd been too angry to tell him I was just scared of losing him. "I didn't mean what I said that night," he said suddenly, "about how I didn't need your advice, how I could make my own decisions. I was 19 and stupid and trying to prove I was a man. But I did need your advice. I needed it every day of the last 18 years. My throat closed up. I know, son." There was a knock on the door. Captain Okonkwo came in, apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Thomas needs to rest. And Mr. Mitchell, there are some things we need to discuss." We stepped into the hallway. The captain kept his voice low. "We'll need to do a full DNA confirmation, though given the level of detail he's provided, there's little doubt. There will be extensive debriefing. Intelligence wants to know everything about where he was held, who held him, how the network operated, and he'll need significant psychological support. Mr. Mitchell, 18 years of captivity has caused severe PTSD, dissociative episodes, depression. The integration process will take years, possibly decades. Whatever he needs, whatever it takes." "There's something else." The captain hesitated. "Your son's death benefits, the pension your wife receives, his name on the memorial wall, all of that will need to be addressed. There will be media attention. This is, you understand, unprecedented." I nodded. Tommy had been officially dead for 18 years. His death had been processed, documented, memorialized. Now we'd have to undo all of that. "And Mr. Mitchell," the captain continued, "you need to prepare yourself and your family. Thomas isn't the 9-year-old, who deployed. He may never be that person again. He's a 2-year-old man with nearly 2 decades of trauma. The son you remember exists in fragments. This version of him may be all you get. He's my son." The words came out fierce. "I don't care who he had to become to survive. I don't care what he remembers or doesn't remember. I've had 18 years to mourn him. I'm not wasting another second." I called Carol from the hospital courtyard, told her everything. She was booking a flight before I'd finished talking. Our other sons, Jacob and Matthew, both in their 40s now with families of their own, were on the next flights from Vancouver and Calgary. The DNA test results came back 4 days later. Match confirmed. Thomas Alexander Mitchell, born the 15th of March 1988, reported killed in action the 4th of September 2007, was alive. I was in Tommy's room when Captain Okonkwo delivered the news. Tommy was having a bad day. He'd barely spoken, had been staring out the window at the mountains with an expression that suggested he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere darker. "Thomas." I put my hand on his shoulder. "It's confirmed. You're my son. You're Tommy Mitchell. You're coming home." He looked at me with eyes that were both ancient and lost. "Home," he repeated. "Edmonton?" "Yeah, Edmonton. Snow and winter. The Oilers. Your mom's terrible bannock, that's somehow worse than mine. Your brothers and their kids. Home." Something shifted in his expression. a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "I don't know if I remember how to be there," he said quietly. "I don't know if I know how to be Canadian anymore." "Then we'll teach you again," I said. "Or you'll teach us who you are now. Either way, you're not doing it alone." Carol arrived the next day. I'd been worried about how Tommy would react, whether he'd remember her. When she walked into the room, he stood up so fast he nearly fell. "Mom," he said, and the word broke both of them. She held him and cried and said his name over and over like a prayer. My baby, you're alive." Jacob and Matthew arrived 2 days later. The reunion was harder. Tommy didn't remember them as clearly. He'd been 19 when he deployed. Jacob had been 16, Matthew 13. Now they were men in their 40s, strangers with familiar features. But they tried. They brought photos, told stories, helped fill gaps. Jacob showed him pictures of his kids, Tommy's niece and nephew he'd never met. Matthew told him about his life, his career as an engineer, the house he'd bought in Calgary. Tommy cried during those visits, mourned the 18 years he'd lost with them, the relationship they might have had. But slowly, carefully, they built something new. The Canadian government arranged for Tommy's transport home 3 weeks later. There was a quiet ceremony at the Edmonton garrison. No media, just family and a few officials. They removed his name from the memorial wall, added it to a different list. Prisoners of war, recovered. He was only the second name on that list in the past 50 years. We brought him to our house, the same house he'd grown up in, on the south side of Edmonton. Carol had kept his room mostly the same. Hockey posters on the walls, his old Oilers jersey hanging in the closet. He stood in the doorway, staring at it like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. "I used to live here," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "Yeah, this was your room. That's your jersey, number 94. You wore it every game day for 3 years of high school." He touched the jersey carefully. 94, Smitty's number. "Ryan Smith," I confirmed, surprised he remembered. "Your favorite player." That night, Carol made dinner. Not anything fancy, just meat, potatoes, and vegetables. Simple food after years of whatever Tommy had been surviving on. We sat at the kitchen table, the four of us, and tried to remember how to be a family. Tommy ate slowly, methodically, like he wasn't sure the food would stay. He kept looking around, assessing exits, tensing at sudden noises. When a car backfired outside, he was on his feet before I could blink, eyes wild. "Sorry," he said, sitting back down slowly. "I'm sorry. I know I'm safe. My brain just doesn't believe it yet." "You don't have to apologize," Carol said. "You don't ever have to apologize for surviving." The first few months were brutal. Tommy had nightmares that left him screaming in Arabic, Pashto, languages I didn't understand. He had panic attacks in grocery stores, in crowds, when people got too close. He saw a therapist 3 times a week, took medication for the PTSD, for the depression, for the anxiety that made it hard for him to leave the house. But there were good moments too. The day he laughed at something on TV. A real laugh that sounded almost like the kid I remembered. The morning I found him in the kitchen making coffee, humming Old Bear in the Timber under his breath. The afternoon he asked if we could watch an Oilers game together, and I did the play-by-play commentary, and he smiled. It was 8 months after he came home when he asked about the scar. We were sitting in the living room, watching hockey, and he'd rolled up his pant leg, staring at the hockey stick-shaped mark on his calf. "I don't remember getting this," he said. "I know I'm supposed to, but I don't." "Bantam hockey," I told him. "You were 8. You went hard into the boards, caught your leg on the metal bracket, 12 stitches. You cried the whole way to the hospital, not because it hurt, but because you thought you'd miss the playoffs." He traced the scar with his finger. "I wish I remembered that. I wish I remembered being that kid who cared that much about hockey." "You're remembering other things," I said. "That's enough." "Is it?" He looked at me with those dark eyes. "Is it enough if I never remember everything? If I'm never fully the son you lost?" "You were never lost," I said. "You were taken. And yeah, you're different now. So am I. So are we all. But you're still my son. That's the only thing that matters." It's been a year now. Tommy lives in the house still, in his old room with the hockey posters. He's taking a course online, something about counseling for trauma survivors. Says maybe he can help other people who've been through what he's been through. He's gained weight, got back up to 165, which Carol says is still too thin but better. His hair is shorter now, the gray less prominent. He smiles more, not often, and never easily, but more. We went to a rink last week. Just to watch, he wasn't ready to skate. But we sat in the stands at Harlack Park, watching kids play shinny hockey on the outdoor ice, and he turned to me. "Did we used to do this?" he asked. "Did you teach me to skate here?" "Yeah. You were 5. Took you 3 hours to make it across the ice without falling. I held your hands the whole time." He nodded slowly. "I don't remember it, but I know it happened. I can feel it, somewhere." "That's enough," I said. "That's enough for now." Because it is. He'll never be the 19-year-old who deployed. I'll never get back those 18 years. We'll never know exactly what happened in all those compounds, all those cells, all those moments of survival. Some memories are gone forever. Some are too painful to revisit, and some are slowly filtering back in fragments. But he's here. He's alive. He's learning to be Thomas Mitchell again. Or maybe learning to be whoever Thomas Mitchell was always supposed to become after surviving the unsurvivable. We've lost 18 years. We'll never get them back. But we have now. We have whatever time is left. And I intend to make every second of it count. Because my son came home. Not the same, not whole, not healed, but alive. And that's everything.